It is the year 1596. The treasury of the most powerful empire on earth lies empty. A single man, locked in a small office, picks up his quill and signs a piece of paper. With this one stroke, he commits a crime so grand, so unthinkable, it had never been attempted on this scale. He declares the world's first global superpower bankrupt. And in doing so, he sets in motion a chain reaction that would strangle economies from Seville to Shanghai, collapse banks in Genoa, and starve millions from the Andes to the English countryside. How does an empire that dug mountains of silver from the earth end up with nothing? This is not a story of poverty. This is a story of a system so flawed, so addicted to its own wealth, that it had to devour everything in its path, including itself. The year is 1545. High in the Andes, a native man named Diego Gualpa is chasing a llama. A gust of wind knocks him to the ground. As he clutches the earth, his fingers close around a heavy metallic stone, pure silver. This is the Cerro Rico, the rich hill of Potosí. It is a discovery that will change the fate of the world, and it is a curse dressed as a blessing. Within decades, Potosí is a city larger than London or Paris, a mountain of silver so vast the Spanish crown claims 1/5 of every ounce mined, the royal fifth. Galleons loaded with bullion begin the treacherous journey across the Atlantic. To Madrid, it seems the money will never stop. It was a tidal wave of pure wealth, and it drowned them. Because Spain's rulers, the Habsburgs, had a problem. They were the most powerful family in Europe, but with power came enemies everywhere. To fight the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean, they needed money. To crush the Protestant rebellion in the Netherlands, they needed money. To fight the French in Italy and the English on the seas, they needed unimaginable amounts of money. The silver from the New World wasn't a treasure, it was collateral. They went to the bankers of Genoa and Antwerp. They said, "Look at our ships, look at our mountain of silver, lend us what we need to fight our wars. We will pay you back with the next shipment." It worked, again and again. The system was perfect, as long as the silver never stopped flowing. But this created a dark, invisible force, inflation. Think of the empire as a body and the silver as blood. They were pumping too much blood into the heart. It flooded the system. Prices in Spain tripled, then quadrupled. A soldier's pay could buy less and less. The silver that arrived in Seville didn't stay. It flowed out immediately to pay debts to German bankers, Italian arms dealers, and Flemish mercenaries. Spain was not a producer. It was a pipeline of silver flowing from a mountain in Bolivia straight into the pockets of their enemies' financiers. The empire was rich, but it was also starving. And then came the true cost of their power. Almost no one talks about this part of the ledger. To feed the mines of Potosí, Spain enacted a system of pure horror, the mita. Every year, 1 in 7 adult men from hundreds of Andean villages was forced to make the journey to the mountain. They were sent into the deep, cold, toxic shafts. Mercury poisoning, tunnel collapses, and sheer exhaustion killed them by the thousands. It is estimated that over 8 million people died for that silver. The empire was literally consuming its subjects to maintain the illusion of wealth. The very source of its money was a mass grave. And what happened next was far worse. The money still wasn't enough. The wars grew bigger. The Habsburgs, especially King Philip II, borrowed more. They began to borrow not just against the next shipment, but against shipments years in the future. They borrowed from new lenders to pay the interest to old lenders. It was a perfect, self-devouring loop and financial Ouroboros. Until 1557, the first bankruptcy, then 1560, then 1575. Each time, the king would simply sit down and declare, "I cannot pay." He would force his bankers to accept new terms, to extend the loans, to take losses. They had no choice. They were too deep. To say no meant total collapse. The king owned them. But the empire always needed more. So, after a few years, the bankers would return. The lending would start again. The silver shipments were the glittering lure. Then came 1588, the Spanish Armada, the greatest fleet ever assembled, sent to conquer England and end the Protestant threat. It was a floating monument of debt, built with loans secured against future American silver. We all know what happened. Storms, fire ships, disaster. The Armada was obliterated. In that moment, the illusion shattered. The invincible empire could be beaten. Its future silver was no longer a sure bet. The final collapse came just 6 years later, in 1596. Philip II, drowning in debts from the Armada and endless war, signed the bankruptcy decree one last time. It was the largest sovereign default in history. It froze credit across Europe. Banks in Genoa collapsed. Trade from Italy to the Baltic seized up. The consequences were global and horrifying. In China, the Ming dynasty had come to rely on Spanish silver to fuel their own economy. When the shipments became erratic, their monetary system convulsed. Tax revenues plummeted. Famine and instability grew, setting the stage for the dynasty's collapse decades later. The world's first global currency crisis had begun in a mountain in Bolivia and ended in starvation in Asia. So, how did Spain bankrupt the world's largest empire? They didn't run out of money. They confused money with power. They believed that the substance of silver was the same as real wealth. It wasn't. Real wealth is food, goods, innovation, the productivity of your people. Spain sacrificed all of that on the altar of silver and debt. They built a system where unimaginable inflows of cash only fed an addiction to more power, which required more war, which demanded more debt. The mountain of silver was never theirs. It was just a shiny placeholder, owned from the moment it was pulled from the earth by the bankers waiting in Europe. And this leaves us with a disturbing modern question. When you look at the world today, at the mountains of digital currency, the abstract numbers, the debt ceilings that keep rising, what is our silver? And this leaves us with a disturbing modern question. When you look at the world today, at the mountains of digital currency, the abstract numbers, the debt ceilings that keep rising, what is our silver? History is not just the past. It is a warning. If you want to explore more hidden truths like this, stories about money, power, and the systems that shape our world, subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be about